Welcome for the lecture series on tourism. Today's topic for the discussion is ethics in tourism. For the tourist, travel can be fun, exciting, adventurous and relaxing. It can be educational, inspiring and thought-provoking. It can also be confusing, exhausting and scary. But what are the impacts and implications of tourism for the host country and its residents? Is there any ethical code that travelers should follow? Yes, there are some ethical codes for the tourism industry. This episode is concerned with the issue of the ethics in tourism industry, and it focuses on the global code of ethics for tourism set by the World Tourism Organization. So, in this episode, we are going to study the topic under the following subheadings for our convenience: Ethical Tourism, Global Code of Ethics for Tourism, Obligations of Stakeholders in Tourism Development, Right to Tourism, and Sustainable Tourism. Let us start our discussion with the ethical tourism. The tourism industry is one of the largest industries in the world. It has the potential to bring major benefits to destinations, but can also be damaging to the people living there and to their environment. Other industries have already understood this unsure nature of trade and have adopted social, environmental and economic responsibility. It is now time for the tourism industry to rise to this challenge, the challenge of ethical tourism. Ethical tourism is in the best interest of all. It offers tour operators a competitive advantage and safeguards the future of the industry by guaranteeing the long-term sustainability of a destination. It also in the interest of those living there and those working for development, as it can help to combat poverty and contribute to sustainable development. The tourism industry is highly competitive and tour operators are under increasing pressure to differentiate their products. Some of the research suggests that once the main criteria for a holiday are satisfied, like locations or facilities, cost and availability, clients will make choices based on ethical considerations such as working conditions, the environment and charitable giving. Clients are also looking for increased quality and experience in their holiday. In this environment, companies would do well to differentiate their products according to the consumer demand that is based on ethical criteria. In this respect, especially in recent years, a new issue is under discussion called ethics in tourism, and it calls all the people involved in tourism industry to follow its codes and help the sustainable development of this industry. So, what is ethical tourism? Ethical tourism has evolved as a term when one considers traveling to or developing tourism in a destination where ethical issues are the key driver. Example, social injustice, human rights, animal welfare or the environment. Ethical tourism is geared towards encouraging both the consumer and industry to avoid participation in activities that contribute or support negative ethical issues. Ethical tourism simply means tourism which benefits people and the environment in different destinations. It can offer a better income to families living in the area by sourcing products and services locally. Coming to the Global Code of Ethics for Tourism. In 1999, the UN World Tourism Organization devised and adopted a Global Code of Ethics for Tourism. It is designed to minimize the negative effects of tourism activity on destinations and local communities, which was officially recognized by the UN in 2001. Encouragingly, there is evidence that the hotel industry is assuming a proactive, collective approach to human rights and business ethics. Major hotel companies have taken significant steps in the past decade to integrate policies on human rights into their stated policies on business conduct on ethics. The Global Code of Ethics for Tourism is a comprehensive set of principles designed to guide key players in tourism development. It concentrates on governments, the travel industry, communities, and tourists. It aims to help maximize the sector's benefits and minimizing its potentially negative impact on the environment, culture, heritage, and societies across the globe. The Code's 10 principles systematically cover the economic, social, cultural, and environmental components of travel and tourism. Code 1. Tourism's contribution to mutual understanding and respect between peoples and societies. Code 2. Tourism as a vehicle for individual and collective fulfillment. Code 3. Tourism, a factor of sustainable development. Code 4. Tourism, a user of the cultural heritage of mankind and contributor to its enhancement. Code 5. Tourism, a beneficial activity for host countries and communities. Code 6. Obligations of stakeholders in tourism development. Code 7 is right to tourism. And Code 8, liberty of tourist movements. And Code 9, rights of the workers and entrepreneurs in the tourism industry. Code 10 is implementation of the principles of the Global Code of Ethics for Tourism. Coming to the first code, that is tourism's contribution to mutual understanding and respect between peoples and societies. Stakeholders in tourism development and tourists themselves should observe the social and cultural traditions and practices of all peoples, including those of the minorities and indigenous peoples, and to recognize their worth. Tourism activities should be conducted in harmony with the attributes and traditions of the host regions and countries and in respect for their laws, practices, and customs. The host communities on one hand and local professionals on the other should notify themselves with the respect the tourists who visit them and find out about their lifestyles, tastes, and expectations. The education and training imparted to professionals contribute to a hospitable welcome. Next is tourism as a vehicle for individual and collective fulfillment. Tourism, the activity most frequently associated with rest and relaxation, sport and access to culture and nature, should be planned and trained as a honored means of individual and collective fulfillment. When practiced with a sufficiently open mind, it is an unique factor of self-education, mutual tolerance, and for learning about the rightful differences between peoples and cultures and their diversity. Tourism activities should respect the equality of men and women. They should promote human rights and, more particularly, the individual rights of the most vulnerable groups, notably children, the elderly, the handicapped, ethnic minorities, and indigenous peoples. Next code is tourism, a factor of sustainable development. All the stakeholders in tourism development should safeguard the natural environment with a view to achieving sound, continuous and sustainable economic growth. All forms of tourism developments that are helpful to saving rare and precious resources as well as avoiding waste production should be given priority and encouraged by all. Tourism infrastructure should be designed and tourism activities programmed in such a way as to protect the natural heritage composed of ecosystems and biodiversity and to preserve endangered species of wildlife. The stakeholders in tourism development and especially professionals should agree to the imposition of limitations or constraints on their activities when these are exercised in particularly sensitive areas. Next part of the discussion is obligations of stakeholders in tourism development. Tourism professionals have an obligation to provide tourists with objective and honest information on their places of destination and on the conditions of travel, hospitality and stays. They should ensure that the contractual sentence proposed to their customers are readily understandable to the tourists. Tourism professionals, insofar as it depends on them, should show concern in cooperation with the public authorities for the security and safety, accident prevention, health protection and food safety of those who seek their services. Tourism professionals, so far as this depends on them, should contribute to the cultural and spiritual fulfillment of tourists and allow them during their travel to practice their religions. Next code is tourism, a user of the cultural heritage of mankind and contributor to its enhancement. Tourism resources belongs to the common heritage of mankind. The communities in whose territories they are situated have particular rights and obligation to them. Tourism policies and activities should be conducted with respect for the artistic, archaeological and cultural heritage which they should protect and pass on to future generations. Particular care should be devoted to preserving and upgrading monuments as well as archaeological and historic sites which must be widely open to tourist visits. Tourism activity should be planned in such a way as to allow traditional cultural products, crafts and folklore to survive and flourish rather than causing them to degenerate and become standardized. Next code is tourism, a beneficial activity for host countries and communities. Local populations should be associated with tourism activities and share equitably in the economic, social and cultural benefits they generate and particularly in the creation of direct and indirect jobs resulting from them. Tourism policies should be applied in such a way as to help to raise the standard of living of the populations of the regions. Special attention should be paid to the specific problems of coastal areas and island territories and to vulnerable rural or mountain regions for which tourism often represents a rare opportunity for development in the face of the decline of traditional economic activities. Coming to the next set of codes, that is right to tourism. The universal right to tourism must be regarded as the consequence of the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay, guaranteed by Article 24 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 7D of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Social tourism, and in particular associative tourism, which facilitates widespread access to leisure, travels and holidays, should be developed with the support of the public authorities. Family, youth, student and senior tourism and tourism for the people with disabilities should be encouraged and facilitated. Next code is liberty of tourist movements. Tourists and visitors should benefit with the international law and the national legislation. They should have liberty to move within their countries and from one state to another. Tourists and visitors should have access to all available forms of communication, internal or external. They should benefit from prompt and easy access to local administrative, legal and health services. They should be free to contact the consular of representatives of their country in the case of emergence. Tourists and visitors should benefit from the same right as the citizens of the country visited concerning the confidentiality of the personal data and information concerning them, especially when these are stored electronically. Next right is rights of the workers and entrepreneurs in the tourism industry. The fundamental rights of the salaried and self-employed workers in the tourism industry and related activities should be guaranteed under the supervision of the national and local administration. Salaried and self-employed workers in the tourism industry and related activities have the right and the duty to acquire appropriate initial and continuous training. They should be given adequate social protection. Job insecurity should be limited so far as possible, and a specific status with particular regard to their social welfare should be offered to seasonal workers in the sector. Coming to implementation of the principles of the Global Code of Ethics for Tourism. The public and private stakeholders in tourism development should cooperate in the implementation of these principles and monitor their effective application. The stakeholders in tourism development should recognize the role of international institutions, among which the World Tourism Organization ranks first, and non-governmental organization with competence in the field of tourism promotion and development, the protection of human rights, the environment or health with due respect for the general principles of international law. The same stakeholders should demonstrate their intention to refer any disputes concerning the application or interpretation of the Global Code of Ethics for Tourism for pacification to an impartial third body known as the World Committee on Tourism Ethics. Environmental ethics for tourism. Due to the complexity of tourism, it is subsequently difficult to think of the homogeneous environmental ethics for this industry. Still, in terms of establishing the framework for stakeholders' interaction with the environment, government policy for tourism has a major influence. The final part of our session is sustainable tourism. Today, some new concepts as sustainable tourism, tourism morality, ethics in tourism, visiting nature, green tourism, responsible tourism, people-oriented tourism and parallel tourism have emerged in tourism industry. Emergence and development of the tourism thought which could adopt itself in terms of social affairs with all ecological features of the touristic regions in the outcome of the such discussion. Sustainable tourism is the concept of visiting a place as a tourist and trying to make only a positive impact on the environment, society, and economy. A key aspect is respect for the people who call the location home, the culture and customs of the area, and the socio-economic system. While sustainable tourism is sometimes confused with ecotourism, ecotourism is actually only one aspect of sustainable tourism. There are some terms which related to sustainable tourism. First one is responsible tourism. It refers to the consumer's choice of destination and mode of transport based on their ethical, political and racial sensitivities, as well as being concerned for the environment and local culture. Next is green tourism. Historically, the definition of this term has been travel which is environmentally friendly or kind that in general does not concern itself with culture or economic elements of the destination. Current uses of the term are becoming broader to incorporate full sustainable tourism principles. Next is ecotourism. Ecotourism, also known as ecological tourism, is a subset of sustainable tourism which focuses on ecology. Ecotourism tends to be encountered in destinations where flora, fauna and cultural heritage are the primary attractions. All tourism has the potential to be more sustainable and could have the following characteristic. First one, economic prosperity. Long-term competitive and tourism business who offers fair pay and conditions for all employees, there is a maximum economic benefit to local communities when products and services for tourism are sourced locally. Sustainable tourism should be relevant to every holiday sold and should offer an opportunity to customers concerned about their travel make a difference. Next is social equality. Sustainability offers great benefits to customers, keeping destinations special, offering safe and satisfying new experience, at the same time having the opportunity to interact with locals who are truly benefiting from their visit. Next is environmental and cultural protection. It gives resources and incentive for destinations to conserve ancient culture and tradition as well as wildlife and the natural environment. It helps in reducing carbon emissions by encouraging accommodation providers and holiday makers to conserve energy. There are some challenges to tourism industry. Let's have brief discussion on this. Tourism is one of the well-known service sector. The tourism industry can become one of the main sources of income for several countries, especially developing nations which have a huge potential for tourism. One of the several ethical issues of the tourism industry is the unrevealing of information to the tourist. The information provided to the tourist before they avail the service is many a time misguided. A lot of relevant information is left out, leaving the tourist confused. Tourists on a regular basis are told about domestic travel and package deals which seem pretty attractive and affordable, but when the actual trip commences, they find several extra expenses being added, leaving the tourist cheated. The authorities do not provide sufficient information as the rates of travel, stay and places. There are several ways the tourism industry may take better care of this problem. The main plan is required from the tourism ministry of the country. More strict rules for tourist satisfaction, providing them the easy access of relevant information about rates, tax and certified places of accommodation and modes of travel are required. A tourist satisfaction is of the utmost importance because an unsatisfied tourist leaves a bad impression about a nation. In this regard, over the last few years, hotel companies have made a firm effort to deal with the impact that business activities have on the environment. Another closely linked challenge for companies is how to manage the ethical operation of their business. Ethical issues arise in four main areas: the supply chain, the local community, the workplace, and customers. There may be concerns about forced labor in the supply chain or exploitation of migrant workers in the workplace. So finally, we can conclude this session. The ethics of tourism is a particularly compelling issue for the developing world. Tourism, as the world's largest service industry, contributing an estimated 5% to the worldwide GDP, it creates both jobs and wealth, but also has the clear social and environmental consequences to deal with it. This industry is therefore faced with more and more burning challenges. Therefore, some principles should be followed by both hosting country and visitor so as to encourage the development of the tourism industry. So students, hope you all enjoyed the session. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Hope we will meet in the future episode. Till then, take care. Thank you.